to you with an idea, do not necessarily turn them down. You can be A/B testing, you can be alternate testing all the time. You can show your users 5 different versions of your product or your site, and you can be actively measuring how they're responding and how that's going. So don't be afraid of trying those things. My #1 things to founders are trust your gut. I have had so many people tell me or be on a stage at one of my events and say, I knew that something was wrong. There were no metrics to show that it was wrong, but it felt wrong. I felt that that employee wasn't working out, or I felt that that design just didn't look good. And they don't do anything until the metrics start showing. Too late. If it feels wrong early in your startup, change it. Just change it right then and there. You have nothing to lose. You are still small, so just change whatever you feel bad about, and you are less likely to fail. Where did I go next? I don't remember what my next slide was. Communication. This is a big thing that I'm noticing. I'm just starting to travel more. We are bringing FailCon to Paris in September, to Chile and Singapore in November, and we are hopefully bringing it here to Brazil in January. So I'll be learning a lot more Portuguese before we do that, I hope. The big difference I'm seeing in some of these cultures is in Silicon Valley, we are very comfortable getting on stage and talking about everything we did wrong. We don't really mind. When we go to investors, one of the questions usually is, well, what have you done wrong? If you can't tell an investor something you've done wrong, that investor usually won't give you money because they think that you're blind. I'm noticing that in some of the other countries, it's really not okay to talk about the mistakes you've made and the failures you've had. And this really needs to change. So you guys get to start working on changing that. Make sure in your life that you've got trusted mentors, people who you really respect. People know about this professionally, that you're supposed to have a professional mentor. Make sure you have a personal mentor as well. Someone that isn't really affected by your company. If your company fails, a lot of your professional mentors will leave because they don't get a percentage of the cut anymore. But if you've got a personal mentor, that should be someone who sticks with you. So make sure you have that. You don't need to also, these are also, the mentors are people that can let you know about your startup in ways that you can't. Make sure you're checking in with your team regularly, because your team is going to identify problems before you can see them as the CEO. And third, make sure you're talking with your users. Your users will let you know exactly how they feel, as some of you probably know. Your users will let you know exactly when they see the problems that are happening. Obviously, sometimes you don't necessarily want to know or want to do exactly what the users tell you. So make sure you've got metrics to back it up. Users like to complain a lot. We all should know this if we have companies, that users are always complaining. But make sure you are addressing every single one of them. These are your team, and if they're letting you know that they don't like something, talk to them. Online right now, there are a lot of tools that you can use. Things like user voice and get satisfaction, Twitter, and your Facebook page. Make sure you are actively taking advantage of those tools, and you are talking with your users, and you are responding to every single complaint that they make, even if you don't actually do anything about it. This will help you catch a lot of these problems before they turn into failures. Bing. Third, I don't know if you have this in Brazil, but in elementary school, people used to say, get a life. Get a life. It's true. I know too many founders who do not have a life. Your startup should be, your baby. You should spend, some founders will tell you to spend 100% of your time on it. I would argue no. Spend 85% of your time on your startup. You need to have a life, or you are much more likely to fail. This means having just a hobby. Personally, I make costumes. I go home and I work on a costume that has nothing to do with my work life. A great example of this is a woman who was the head engineer at Mint.com. Mint was an accounting software that was bought by Intuit for a ton of money. When they got bought, she went and she started her own startup. And she was making a tool to help micropayments in small companies. Well, in her free time, she was going to yoga once a day for an hour. And she noticed that during her yoga classes, payment for yoga classes was really broken. You didn't know when people attended. You couldn't really follow up with them to get the payment later. So she shifted. She said, there's a lot of people making programs that are payments for small businesses. I'm going to move over and I'm going to make payments for yoga classes, which seems like a really micro, a very small audience. She's now grown it so that she is serving almost every single yoga studio in California and is now growing into the rest of America, which is huge. And it's all because she was going to her yoga class regularly. And the idea with this is that having these outside tastes helps you solve your company problems. It lets you see things from another perspective, and it lets you get in the head of your users, who usually are not a bunch of small business owners or a bunch of startup founders like you are. They're people that you actually aren't relating to. So that's really important. It also helps you, and I'll talk about this more, bounce back from a failure. A lot of founders hide in their room when they failed, and they don't ever talk about it. And having things that you can go out to during the day, like your yoga class, like your band practice, like your football practice, just gets you active again and gets you thinking about things in the right way. Bing. All right, so some of those were ideas on how to try to avoid failure. Your company might just suck. Sorry, it's just bad. Pocket it, put it away, move on really quickly. So what can you do to try? I know the topic of this title, or the title of my talk, was something like how to make failure a positive experience. You can't. I'm just going to end that right now. Failure is never positive. It always hurts, and it's really hard. But hopefully we can make the after something a little better. The number one thing, and I was telling some people in the back this, is when your company has a failure, take responsibility. As I said earlier, don't blame others. A great story for this is there's a woman named Janice Frazier, and she started Adaptive Path, which did really well. Then she started a company called Emmett Labs, which didn't do so well. It actually lost millions of dollars. She had to lay off like 300 people, and it was an epic failure. And she came on stage at FailCon, and she said, I wrote all of my investors a letter. And in that letter, I apologized for destroying the company. I took all the blame. I identified every single problem that happened, what I did wrong, why it was my fault, and what I learned from it. And I thanked them for their support. And she sent it. Every single investor wrote her back and said, I want to invest in your next company. She had just lost them all, something like $10 million. And every single one of them said, we're in for your next company. And it was because she wrote this identifying what all the problems were and how she would fix them in her next company, which is a lot more impressive than someone who's never started a company or never had a failure. Because failure or success is really just luck, where failure is actually taking a lesson and learning it if you can. So from that letter, I learned, make sure that you are taking the blame. As I said earlier, if someone that you've hired is not doing well, move them. It is not their fault that you hired them in the wrong place. It is your fault. Put them somewhere else. Make sure you are apologizing to everyone involved when there is a failure. Make sure that if you want to work with them again, you are letting them know what you learned and what you will be changing to make it better. And make sure you thank them for your help. Even if they're the ones that did wrong, make sure you thank them. People will want to work with you again. It's really surprising. This is on kind of the get a life thing. Stay engaged with the community. I don't know, I've heard the Brazilian community is really growing in the startup industry. I know the Brazilian Innovators Group, and they're really great. I work with them a lot. So make sure you are getting engaged with that community. Because when you have a failure, that should be your circle of protection. I don't know if it is right now. I know like in France, the founders there won't talk about their failures with each other. You guys should be. You should be open to that. Let people know about your failure and what you learned, and get their feedback on it, because they'll bring in an outside perspective and they'll help you learn more. While you're trying to recover, a lot of startup founders will jump right back into a new project, and I suggest you take a little while to just recover. Just think about it. A great thing to do in that time is go join another startup. Go join another company and learn from them and bring your ideas to the table. This will help you just get really, engaged and excited again. You should also, in that process, learn what new innovations and ideas are out there. Because while, at least for me, when I was holed up working on my startup, I didn't know anything that was going on around me. It was just my company, mine, everything, I don't know about those. But once I actually left my startup, once we failed, I suddenly saw all of this really exciting technology that was happening while I wasn't paying attention. So take that as an opportunity to really learn and get engaged with what everybody else is doing. From this, you can really help create a safe environment for everybody else, which is the goal of FailCon. We've created FailCon to try to allow founders to talk about these mistakes that they've made and what they've learned along the way. I know I'm actually almost done with my presentation. I am. This is my last slide, so I know you all want to go home soon. It's the last talk of the day. So why is this important? I don't actually know why the folks at Expo Y invited me down here. Hopefully it's for the same reasons that I think this is a really important topic. As I said at the start, you are going to fail. Every single one of you in this audience is going to fail at some point. If you don't ever fail, it means you were not taking enough risks with yourself and your company. For that reason, it's really important that we start talking about it. You really can't judge another person because they had a really big failure. It's probably not always their fault. I know I just said that they should take the blame. They should take the blame. But it's probably not all their fault. It's a lot of market, it's a lot of money, and I bet they learned a lot. We need to start focusing a lot more on how we can support one another getting out of it. A big reason that I started FailCon was recognizing when I was a founder that I cannot learn from your success, or from yours, or from yours. I can't learn a lot from them. The market's going to be different, the audience is going to be different, the people we know are going to be different. So getting up on stage and talking about what you did right isn't replicable. But getting up on stage and talking about what you did wrong and listening to what other people did wrong is something that's very replicable, or something that you don't want to replicate, I guess I should say. I've also, and this is kind of my personal opinion, I feel like until you failed, you don't really have your head on your shoulders yet. You're either going to be taking too big of risks, and you're going to get really cocky, you're going to get a big ego on your head, and you're going to be really hard to work with. Or you're going to be really, really afraid of failure, and you're not going to take enough risks. A great example of this is Max Levchin. He was one of the founders of PayPal, and he came up on stage and he talked about how he had to foreclose on his house, declare bankruptcy, and his wife almost left him. And then he realized, so that's it? That's as bad as it gets, a house foreclosure and a declaring bankruptcy? I can do that. I can deal with that. And he was comfortable to take more risks in his life because he went through that one. And he got through it, and it was tough, but it was okay. So making sure that with that failure, you can reassure yourself and handle it again later. So that was it. They gave me an hour. I think I did it in like 30 minutes. I really love hearing about your mistakes. I think they're really fun. I'm happy to share mine. This is how you can get in touch with me, my email and my Twitter handle. I think I'm the only English tweeter at this event so far, so maybe some of you can tweet something in English at me and I'll feel a little better. So feel free to email me at any point in time. And at this point, if anyone has any questions, as I said, I'm happy to take them. There's probably a lot more I could say, but it's always better, I think, to go with the audience. Someone's pointing with the mic. Somebody knows any questions?
I will ask him to ask in Portuguese, or at least ask in English and translate.
I think I can speak here.
Try, do it.
You say that when you feel something wrong about an employee, you have to act. But sometimes what I feel about that employee is not exactly what my client feels about this employee, and I have to act by my feelings or by metrics.
I mean, it's a tricky question. If your client doesn't like one of your or if your client likes one of your employees and you don't like your employee, I would really argue that it's not your client's business who you employ. It's your client's business that you get the job done really, really well. If it's one of your client's employees, obviously you can't do anything. But if you've got an employee that you don't really like, obviously if you just personally dislike them, it might be a little different. But if you don't like their business, if they just don't feel right for your company, I think you still need to act. I think you still need to let them go. If they're really close to your client, there might be a value in talking to your client about it. Obviously, you have to be very careful about how you handle that, but just reaching out and saying, we might be moving so-and-so to a different department.